Well, first off, I have to thank Matt for, once again, inviting me into yet another groovy fold of his multifaceted and non-stop existence. The thing is, though, I have to say, at times like this, when I'm brought in front of a group of people and identified, at least partly, as an actor, I feel the need to address a common stereotype about actors, that they're shallow, self-absorbed, solipsistic people who care nothing for anyone other than themselves, which is not true. After all, I love Matt Schlein. He's smart, energetic, creative, groundbreaking, boundary-busting, optimistic, won't take no for an answer, never asks for permission, only apologizes kind of guy. He kind of reminds me of me, so what's not to love? In spite of my love for Matt, though, I'd like to dedicate this talk to my boyfriend, George Clooney. Now, he's not actually my boyfriend, but Matt told me I could say anything that I wanted to here, and I've always wanted to say that in public. I mean, come on, how many women get that opportunity? So anyway, for those of you who aren't still wondering just what the heck I'm doing up here in the first place, you might have moved on to contemplating the title of this talk, Rising Tide Beach Party. And you might have begun asking yourselves, what exactly does Rising Tide Beach Party mean? Well, the roundabout answer is that a couple of years ago, I was in Denmark, and I was chatting with a woman named Elizabeth, who is the tall, intense, clearly descended from Vikings proprietress of the B&B where I was staying. And I was telling her about my interest in all things related to global warming and peak oil and general resource depletion and my desire to inspire widespread cultural transformation, my hobbies. And Elizabeth fixed me with a hard, blue-eyed stare. And she said, "The problem with climate change and peak oil is they are not funny and they are not sexy. You have got to make them funny and you have got to make them sexy." And she was right. After all, if we met at a party and I told you I was a solo performer specializing in a poignant, heartfelt articulation of the emotional challenges of living on a planet seriously imperiled by the consequences of humanity's preternatural short-sightedness and unfettered self-serving greed, which I am, you'd throw a drink in my face and go rearrange the hors d'oeuvres. But if I told you that I'm a solo performer currently touring a comedy about the First Lady of the United States launching a sex strike to combat global warming with the help of a frog sock puppet, a solar-powered vibrator, and a theme song called Unfuck the World, which I am, you might be willing to buy me a drink. And more importantly, you might even be willing to come to the show, which is key to my pleasure as a performer, the health of my career, and your experience of being both entertained and inspired, which is really what my job is all about. Because we are all living with the same set of given circumstances on this little planet of ours. I mean, there's the set of our regular given circumstances, which have to do with the heaven and heartache of merely being alive, and the contradictions inherent in our dual nature of being both, as I love when Ram Dass says this, God in drag, as well as just a bunch of fancy animals looking for a nice meal, a warm cuddle, and the chance to not get eaten by something larger and toothier than we are. That's the story of life on Earth. Life on the material plane. Life as critters with an infinite capacity for both elation and grief, who experience everything from brutal decapitation to glorious transubstantiation. And all that alone would be plenty, wouldn't it? It'd be enough for 10,000 lifetimes. But then there's climate change, which, because it threatens to transform the Earth into a planet quite unlike the one on which we grew up, kind of overwhelms all the rest of our concerns. Or at least it should. It doesn't yet, and that is a bit of a problem. Clearly, there has been lots and lots and lots of talk and argument and hysteria and misinformation, but unfortunately, humanity is not quite getting its act together. The truth is, we are blowing through scientifically established tipping points at an alarmingly accelerated rate. And we're seeing now on the planet extreme weather, droughts, floods, fires, melting glaciers, rising oceans, methane bubbles, receding ice caps, mass extinctions. It's all pretty much a play-by-play of every climate scientist's worst-case scenario. We're trying. We really are. But we're struggling. And if we had 50 or 100 years to get it right, we would. You know, like we did with slavery or civil rights or apartheid or Northern Ireland, ubiquity of chocolate. After all, we've been doing things like fair trade and organic agriculture and alternative energy, and we are lumping our way forwards. But we don't have 50 or 100 years to figure it out. The planetary clock is ticking in a way which makes our situation beyond urgent. We used to think that the Earth was far too large and resilient to get seriously messed up by the likes of us puny Homo sapiens. But it turns out human beings are a transformational force equivalent to asteroids and giant volcanoes and the slow, inexorable drift of the tectonic plates. Geologists tell us we have changed things so much that we've actually entered a whole new geologic era. Goodbye Holocene, hello Anthropocene. Now all of this, understandably, is hard to take in, digest, and respond to in any way which feels at all meaningful or effective. It's really kind of mind-blowing. I mean, if it were a movie, it would be fantastically exciting. Be better than an alien invasion. So, Kathy, you're probably saying to yourself, where exactly does this beach party business come in? Well, here's the thing. Either we respond to this information by taking to our bed with a buddy and a box of chocolate and just chow down and have end of the world sex until, the end of the world. Or we find a way to mainline some high quality adrenaline into the situation and ignite the global psychospiritual transformation necessary to reframe and reimagine a whole new way of living on this planet and with each other. We find a way to recapture humanity's narrative and invent another story of our place on and responsibility to this planet. Fun, right? Total beach party material. Actually, it should be fun. It took an enormous amount of creativity and ingenuity to get us here. I mean, think about it. We basically pulled a bunch of black goo from the ground and made a civilization out of it. And a lot of what we made was pretty fantastic. We made Lycra, aspirin, toothbrushes, computers, airplanes. It's all terrific. It just wasn't sustainable. So why can't we have an amazing time figuring out how to clean up the mess? Why can't the urgency give us a heroic sense of meaning and purpose? After all, this is what all the great epic stories are all about. Rooting for the underdogs to conquer an impossible situation so they can save the world and get a big smooch at the end. So how do we do all that? I think this is where the power of the arts is so vital and where the role of teachers, you all, is absolutely without exception. Because I submit to you that while making right and just laws is important, no piece of legislation is as powerful as a great song. No march or debate is as piercing as a painting. Yes, we needed the Civil Rights Act, but we also needed We Shall Overcome. We needed great pacifists, but we also needed Guernica. So, you all here, as teachers in general, and teachers of writing, and teachers who write, have an invaluable job dropped in your lap. You're critical to helping shape the conversation and helping cultivate and grow people who will continue to shape the conversation far into the future. You're nurturing both imagination itself and the capacity to express imagination, and express it with the three best tools we have: truth, humor, and love. You're the guardians and mentors of people who will find a way to not only describe the world as it is, but the world as it could be. And that's deeply important, because most people can't imagine what they've never seen. That's why it's so hard to absorb and understand all this fast-acting anthropogenic climate change. It's never happened before. It's why it's so hard to visualize how we can fix it, because we don't have an image of what a successful response would look like. We don't even have a clear sense that there is a future for us out there. In fact, a group of deep thinkers, including Stuart Brand, who is the founder of the Whole Earth Catalog, and the musician Brian Eno, recognized a few years ago that humanity had completely lost its sense not only of our future, but of time itself. Our experience of now went from a prolonged moment of general nowness to a constantly fleeting series of micro moments of future now past, future now past, future now past. And our ideas of a long-term future, which used to be bright, shiny, and hopeful, fall at best into the realm of nasty, brutish, and short. So they decided to address the problem by building a clock, a huge clock, hundreds of feet tall, a huge, beautiful clock, a huge, beautiful, actually rather exquisite Art Deco style clock, which would run for 10,000 years. And they'd place it on a mountain in a remote corner of Nevada, so that visiting the clock would be something of an effortful pilgrimage. And the very idea of an exquisite clock running for 10,000 years, bonging out decades as seconds, and powered in part by the footfalls of the visiting pilgrims, well, I thought this might do something to capture our collective imagination. And trebuchet-like, fling our conscious awareness over the battlements of our near-term worries and contracted sense of possibility and into a distant future of clarity, hope, and wonder. And they're doing it. They bought the mountain. They built a prototype of the clock. It's about 10 feet high, and it sits in a glass case in the Museum of Science in London. And it stops people in their tracks because it is just so freaking cool. It's called the Clock of the Long Now. It's the love child of beauty, whimsy, and science. And it's designed to rescue us from a narrow, short-sighted ennui and despair that most of us don't even know we have. This is what artists do. This is what you're training your students for. This is why you keep writing yourselves. So don't give up.